Nana Shastra Vichanek Nipano Sahadharma Samsapakam Lokanam Hitakarino Tribhuvane Mahanyo Sharanyakaro Radha Krishna Padaravindra Bhajana Nandena Mattalikayo Vande Rupa Sanatano Raghujugo Shri Jiva Gopalako Vande Rupa Sanatano Raghujugo Shri Jiva Gopalako. So now the other aspect of chapter 2, the first page of chapter 2 as well as the first page of chapter 3 discuss the subject matter which you probably would see in your laptop now presentation, is eligibility for Krishna consciousness. So after describing sadhana bhakti, now Rupa Goswami discusses how does bhakti begins, who can practice bhakti, or what is a qualification for it. As I was making a point, everything requires certain prerequisites or qualification. What is the requirement for bhakti? So the pages in your book is chapter 2 first page and chapter 3 first page. I'm not going to read it from the book now. You can refer it later on, but you understand from where this discussion is. Prabhupada have actually mentioned in the chapter 2 in the beginning, but in verses sequence it comes later on. So I'm just going in that format. So it becomes a little easy for you what's happening. So what is the requirement for bhakti? Srila Rupa Goswami says, okay, let me ask this question to all of you. We can keep the books aside, Prabhus. Pay attention on the presentation, and you pay attention on the toggling because this will be a lot of based on the presentation. You don't have to see anything in your book now. So my question to all of you is, how many of you have thought about how does somebody, in case like you're also practicing devotee, how did you start practicing bhakti? Or how did you take to bhakti? How does anyone take to bhakti? For example, we would have seen, let's say, any programs we have attended. Maybe there are many people used to come for those programs. And as the sequence of programs keeps moving forward, and the group size, continuously, satatam, keeps on reducing. At the end of it, only handful of people remains, isn't it? So this question has been discussed here by Srila Rupa Goswami on how somebody can take to the bhakti. What is the requirement? So Srila Rupa Goswami says the requirement for that is if we simply have an attraction to executing devotional service. That's how devotional service begins. Attraction. So bhakti begins with attraction. But question comes, how can you have attraction to something if you haven't tasted before? Right? For example, how many of you used to like chocolates? I'm not asking if you still like it, but you could only have a taste for chocolate if in case some of your friends or mama, mommy, somebody came and gave you a chocolate. You ate it and you said, wow, very nice, I would like to have it. So Srila Rupa Goswami says, bhakti can only begin when you have taste or some attraction. Now, in that sense, which means bhakti can begin if you have some attraction, which means even guests who have attraction for prasadam, that is also very nice. There's a high potential that they can take to bhakti because at least they're coming for prasadam. Therefore, if you look at Srila Prabhupada's strategy, what a smart move Prabhupada made. He knew the audience, everyone would not be, everyone would not just like philosophy. This is not the era for philosophy. People hardly have any capacity to really read and understand philosophy or hear philosophy. Okay, let's have kirtans. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu introduced kirtans. Okay, some people may not be into kirtans also, maybe lazy for that. Who doesn't like food? I mean, how many of you would agree, how many of you acknowledge this? If in case you have been, prior to coming to ISKCON, prior to that you have been to different temples, what do you say among many differences? One distinctive difference between ISKCON and other spiritual forums or temples was the prasadam. Yes or no? I remember I was in Columbus temple and I had done some cooking. I used to cook for Shri Radha Nadbade in the morning. And after cooking, there were hardly anybody there in the morning hours. And I came down to, after cleaning up the kitchen and altered everything, I came down to sit and honor prasadam. One guest came to the temple. Hospitality, you have to be very kind. So I was just making my plate. Then I saw there is a guest. So I was like, okay, let me serve him a prasadam. So I said, can I serve you some prasadam? He said, why not? Why not? I prepared a whole big, nice plate for him. I said, please sit down. And he was looking at me, something really strange going on. He said, no, I have to go. I said, yes, but have prasadam. And I brought the whole plate for him. He said, मैं खाना खाने के लिए नहीं आया हूँ यहाँ पर. I said, prasadam. He said, no, give me something, just 2 drops in my palm. He was an Indian. So how many of you remember going to temple on the name of prasadam, you're getting some drops in your palm? He said, no, give me. I said, no, wait a second. For us, prasadam is full plate. You sit down and have full plate. So Prabhupada created a system, Of course, this was coming in Parampara, but we have the Dahi Chida festival, Nityanand Prabhu asking Raghunath, to have that festival. So like that, even if somebody has attraction for prasadam, which is considered to be all good. So it begins with attraction. The question again goes back to, if it begins with attraction, how does an individual develops an attraction? Presentation, please. Attraction of taste is a qualification for making commitment to the systematic cultivation of sadhana bhakti. However, there is no qualification required for receiving mercy and beginning ajnata sukriti. So, take out the slide. Maybe we can have just quick discussion here. So what Srila Rupa Goswami is saying, all of us, if you go back and kind of just a little bit pause for maybe let's say 10 seconds, you all took to the process of bhakti because you got attracted towards some element of bhakti. Yes or no? It could be Krishna Prasad, it could be Kirtans, it could be deities, it could be Vaishnavas, it could be philosophy. We have numerous things to offer to the society. Do you all acknowledge there was one strong pull for us? There was some attraction which used to bring us every week. Yes or no? Just like we were making the point of the day, now we have started some follow-up culture. But before, until recently in our Hinjawadi, there was nothing. Most of you have just come because you had some attraction. You liked some aspect of bhakti. But Prabhupada also said some push is required. So now question is, how did you develop some attraction while others not? Why? And Srila Rupa Goswami gives an answer. He said that attraction could develop because you had performed bhakti in your past life. But the problem is, bhakti can only begin when you have attraction. Are you getting the point? Now, if you say, I began bhakti this life because from attraction, this attraction came from past life bhakti, and past life bhakti would have started from some attraction. That attraction came from some bhakti. That bhakti, it becomes a whole circle. So when did it all started? Go back to the presentation. When did it all started? Let's take a look at it. So beginning with Ajnata Sukriti, spiritual advancement. So point is, so we would have performed some bhakti in the past life. And as we know, in the case of, Prabhupada mentions many places, and Bhagavad Gita also mentions, we'll come to that reference later on. But the point is, bhakti is never destroyed. Bhakti is eternal. In the example of Bharat Maharaj becoming a deer, then it becoming a Jad Bharat. So whatever you have done, you continue from there. So spiritual advancement is eternal. Attraction to Krishna gained from previous advancement and devotion service remains in one's heart. In your future life, it impels one to seek the association of devotees and take up the practice from where one left off. Thus, we can see devotees coming to the Krishna conscious movement who begin at different levels of advancement. Okay, so which means in the past life we would have performed some bhakti because of which we have had some attraction for bhakti. All right. One's qualification for sadhana bhakti depends on the strength of his taste or attraction. This is a very important point. What it means, our ability to practice sadhana bhakti, it depends on our attraction. The stronger the attraction, the more seriously we'll practice sadhana bhakti. The variation in attraction, it all depends on how much devotional service you have performed in the past. You getting it? For example, let's talk about, let's say Bharat Maharaj. He became the deer, and then he became Jad Bharat. Now, how staunch was in his practice, although being born in a Brahmana family, remembering all about his past, knowing everything, he would do intentionally everything wrong so that he got nothing to do with anyone in this world. Everyone would call him fool, he's fine with it. Because he just doesn't want to develop any relationship with anyone in this world except for Krishna. Because he already got caught up because in the past. So his intensity was because of his past devotional practice. You getting it? So attraction towards devotional service or towards Krishna depends on with what intensity we have practiced devotional service. And that's the point being made here. So therefore, when individuals comes to the bhakti, individuals comes to the practice of bhakti, based on how much devotional service they have performed in the past, they carry different levels of attraction. And that different levels of attraction represent different levels of sincerity. They take to Krishna. Is that clear? All right. But the question still remains, how did they started bhakti in the last life? Because it begins with attraction. Okay, moving forward. Consequently, advancement in Krishna consciousness is not based on our intellectual abilities, but on the taste for hearing Krishna Katha. Srila Prabhupada explains. For persons who have a natural taste for understanding books like Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, devotional services, easier than for those who are simply accustomed to mental speculation and argumentative process. I have given the page number from my book so that when you read the presentation, you'll catch it what it is. Okay. So, what if there is no continuity? For example, you have not performed bhakti in the past life. You are a fresh case in the bhakti movement. So what it is mentioned. But even if there is no continuity, if only by chance a person takes interest in a pure devotee's instruction, he can be accepted and can advance in devotional service. Srila Prabhupada writes, Nectar Devotion, page number 19, which means maybe in the past we have not performed, but somehow we decided to follow the good advice given to us by a Vaishnava. Because we have decided to follow a Vaishnava, then our bhakti begins. Okay. Therefore, Srila Rupa Goswami says, what is the qualification for bhakti? If we simply have an attraction to executing devotion service, but the question is, how do we acquire attraction to bhakti? The attraction to bhakti comes for devotion service executed in previous life. So in other words, how did my bhakti begin in my previous life? Must have begun with attraction. So if you see, execution of devotional service depends on attraction. Attraction gives desire to practice devotional service, and practice of devotional service gives attraction to devotional service. It's like a circular thing. But from where it all began? How it all began? Agyan Sukyuta is because of your executing devotional service. How did it all begin? And it all begins with the causeless mercy of a Vaishnava. It all began with causeless mercy. Only a devotee can give bhakti. We cannot on our strength acquire bhakti. How a causeless mercy? How all of you may be propagating mercy or giving mercy of the Lord to so many even without your knowledge. Just like distributing Krishna Prasad. Just like doing Harinam. Somebody accepts Krishna Prasad from you, not knowing what is the value of Prasad, he accepts and eats Prasadam. That's a devotional service performed. That results in Bhakti Unmukha, Agyat Sukriti. Agyat Sukriti means not he has intentionally done. Unintentionally he has taken part in a devotional practice. And how did he take part? Because of the causeless mercy of a Vaishnava. Therefore, imagine if you're going out on Harinam Sankirtan, you engage somebody, chant the holy names of the Lord. He chants even once. As the scripture says, your bhakti has begun. What to speak of somebody chants Hare Krishna? Even if somebody indirectly chants, even the word Haram, which means Hey Ram, his devotional service begins. So for all of us, how our devotional service began? There is an interjection in our karmic cycle or account from a devotee. And he disturbed our karmic cycle, and through that, we have taken to devotional service. And we could be practicing devotional life from many, many lifetimes, because of which we have developed different gradations. But it all began with the causeless mercy of a devotee. Is that making sense? How it all begins with? So therefore, a very important verse is quoted in this regard. Yah kenapi yati bhagyena jata shraddho sa sevane nati shakto na vairagya bhag asyam adhikarya so. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, 14th chapter of the second wave. Srila Rupa Goswami writes, one who has become purified by association with great devotees engaged in the service of the Lord, who is not overly attached to material enjoyment, not overly attached, renounced, or false renounced, such a person is qualified candidate for devotional service. So what requires to practice devotional service? What requires to begin is causeless mercy. And that causeless mercy results into ajnana sukriti, which results into attraction. And what is required to practice devotional service is detachment. First of all, not too much attachment to bhoga aishwarya and not too much detachment. When there is too much detachment, we all understand too much attachment to bhoga aishwarya prasaktanam, we cannot have any, inclination for practicing. Even if you practice bhakti, we'll practice for some time. As soon as our bhoga, desired bhoga we'll get, we'll walk away. Now when we are too renounced, this is particular for Jnanis and Mayavadis, when they're too renounced, bhakti is a path of emotions. They cannot affiliate themselves to the path of bhakti, which means emotions, because their heart has become too dry because of artificial renunciation. This is mentioned by Lord Shri Krishna in 11th canto to Uddhava. Yes, this is a shloka which Lord Shri Krishna speaks to Uddhava. And he says, Yadrachaya mad kathado jata shraddhastu yapuman na nirvinno nati sakto bhakti yogosya siddhidaha. If somehow or other, by good fortune, I particularly highlighted, one develops faith in hearing and chanting, my glorious Krishna speaking to Uddhava, such a person being neither very disgusted, which means detached, nor very attached to material life, should achieve perfection through the path of loving devotion to me. If somehow or other by good fortune, which means nimitta matram bhavasava sachi, that's what Krishna told Arjuna, become the instrument of my grace. And how all of us can become an instrument of Krishna's grace? By somehow or other creating a good fortune in the lives of others. And how can we create good fortune in the lives of others? By somehow helping them either remember Krishna or know about Krishna. How can we do that, remember or know Krishna? Maybe one thing that we all can do, if you travel around, carry some Krishna prasadam. There would always be beggars on the street. There would be always a co-passenger next to you. Give him some prasadam. Is that too difficult? It's so easy. Even without knowing what he's eating, have you created good fortune in his life or her life? That's what Lord Shri Krishna is saying. And those who are not overly attached or detached can practice bhakti. This lifetime or next lifetime, it will begin. And based on our faith and Shastric Praman, will qualify us to different categories of bhaktas. Next subject matter will be types of devotees. Kanishta, Madhyama, Uttama. We'll come to it. But is that clear so far? Let's go back to the presentation again. So which means, as I said in the beginning, even if somebody comes to your program only for honoring prasadam, should we be upset or should we be happy? Managers become upset sometimes. बोले क्या प्रभु जी प्रसादम का अकाउंट नहीं दिया, आ गए एंड में ही आते हैं. Managers have right to be upset. Ultimately they are managing the event and they have to see the head count, and some devotees who are given the count, they don't get prasadam. But ultimately from the perspective of Shastra, no problem, at least the good fortune is getting created. It's a different thing. It may take few lifetimes for them to digest and produce the result. But at least what's the problem in that? Like that. Okay, next. which also means your one WhatsApp message or your one call to invite somebody for a program can change his or her life. Yes or no? And I'm pretty sure all of you who have been engaged now in outgoing services, preaching services, you will definitely have one or two people who you met for the first time or you called up for the first time and now they have become a practicing devotee. I remember who was this devotee, I believe. I believe Mother Poonam itself, right? Mother Poonam herself. She was a case. Her family was a case, or maybe Deepak Prabhu. Kaushal Prabhu had posted one of those days Blue Ridge program notification on his WhatsApp status. That status was seen by, I believe, Dr. Poonam's family, and from there she got connected. And she started going, I was such a sincere and serious practitioner like this. Many, many examples, You would have distributed a book. Just now we distributed books. So many nice families have come for the program and youth have come for the program. Like that, good quality is created. So, further speaking on the good fortune, it is said, presentation please. Brahmanda Brahmite Kona Bhagyavan Jiva Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Beej. According to the karma, all living entities are wandering throughout the entire universe. Anyways, I'll give the summary of this, what it means. Brahmanda Brahmita Kona Bhagyavan Jiva. So according to one's karmic cycle, living entities moving, wandering all over the universe. But in that Bhagyavan Jiva, one is said to be very fortunate. Who? Guru Krishna Prasade Bhai Bhakti Lata. Who has had the fortune to meet a bona fide spiritual master, Krishna Prasad, and from whom he received the seed of Krishna Bhakti, Bhakti Lata Beej. That person said to be the most fortunate person. Eligibility. Krishna is situated in everyone's heart, and if one desires something, Krishna fulfills one's desire. If the living entity by chance or fortune comes in contact with the Krishna consciousness movement and wishes to associate with that movement, Krishna, who is situated in everyone's heart, give him the chance to meet a bona fide spiritual master. This is called Guru Krishna Prasad. This is the purport of this verse. Krishna is prepared to bestow his mercy upon all living entities, and as soon as the living entity desires the Lord's mercy, the Lord immediately gives him an opportunity to meet a bona fide spiritual master. How many of you had an experience in book distribution? You knocked on the door and somebody opened the door and said, "Oh, I have been looking for Bhagavad Gita." How many of you had that? I've had so many experiences. I was just wondering today morning, wish I could get a copy of Bhagavad Gita. Oh, you have come, and they would give you red carpet welcome. Please, aiye, baithiye, pani pijiye. Have you had that? Krishna is prepared to bestow, which means Paramatma within his heart fulfilled his wish by inspiring you to walk down to his place. Like that. Krishna is prepared to bestow his mercy upon all living entities, and as soon as the living entity desires the Lord's mercy, the Lord immediately gives him an opportunity to meet a bona fide spiritual master. Such a fortunate person is fortified by both Krishna and the spiritual master. He is helped from within by Krishna and from without by the spiritual master. Both are prepared to help the sincere living being become free from material bondage. The purport continues. The rest of it you all can read as a homework. Very, very. Prabhupada then further gives the story of Narada Muni. I'll take a while to read the whole purport, but I hope you understood. I'll read this famous shloka. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhu Kabanahe Shavanadi Shuddha Chitta Karahe Udaye. Devotional service to Krishna is within everyone. Simply by once associating with devotees, hearing the good instructions, chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, dormant love for Krishna is awakened. In this way, one acquires the seed of devotional service. Good fortune. Kona bhage karo samsara shayana mukhaye sadhu sange tabe krishne rati upajaye. Madhya Leela, 22nd chapter, verse number 45. By good fortune, one becomes eligible to cross the ocean of nescience, and when one's term of material existence decreases, one may get an opportunity to associate with pure devotees. By such association, one's attraction to Krishna is awakened. So I don't know how many of you have realized, if you're thinking karma is not supporting you, destiny is not supporting you, you're wrong. The good fortune have already arisen in our life long, long ago. The time when you started practicing Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. Sometimes devotee says, "Hamara tare hamare saath nahi de rahe. Hamari destiny hamare saath nahi de rahi." But it doesn't look like you're already the most fortunate person. Brahmande Brahmite Kone Bhagyavan Jiva Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Vijay, yeah, you got Guru's mercy, you're practicing, you're chanting the holy names of the Lord. Yet you say, my destiny looks like in doldrums. Kuch chal raha hai gadbad. That probably because of Vaishnava aparad. Nothing else. Nothing else. Nothing else. Good fortune. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains this point. Is this fortune the result of accident or something else? In the scriptures, devotion service and pious activity are considered fortunate. Pious activities can be divided into three categories. One is Bhoga Unmukha Sukriti, Moksha Unmukha Sukriti, and Agyata Sukriti. And third is Bhakti Unmukha Agyata Sukriti, which means, you have engaged in some pious activity that gives you Bhoga and Moksha, and similarly Bhakti, like that. These last two awards of pious activity are not actually fortunate, which means Bhoga and Moksha. Pious activities are fortunate when they help one becomes Krishna conscious. The good fortune of Bhakti Unmukhi is attainable only when one comes in contact with a devotee. By associating with a devotee willingly or unwillingly, one advances in devotional service. Thus, one's dormant Krishna consciousness is awakened. Ghost hunters, you're a walking ghost hunter. Any Jivatma comes in contact with you, he gets liberated from Bhuta. That's what is mentioned. You awaken the good fortune in their life, despite you and us knowing what we are doing. That's the power of bhakti here. So that's the point which is mentioned here. This is from Srimad Bhagavatam. I've just made some quotation. I'll make this last quote and move forward. Bhavapavargo brahmato yada bhavech janasya tarhi achuta satsamagamaha satsangamo yarhi tadeva sadgato paravareshitvai jayate ratihi. O my Lord, O infallible Supreme Person, when a person wandering throughout the universe has become eligible for liberation from material existence, he gets an opportunity to associate with devotees. When you associate with devotees, his attraction for you is awakened. You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the highest goal of the topmost devotees, and the Lord of the universe. In other words, what it indicates, your return ticket is confirmed and already dispatched. Return ticket back home, back to Godhead. Only date has not been written. Okay. उसमें तारीख नहीं लिखी गई है, but return ticket हम सबके नाम का छप गया है. And what is an evidence of it? This is the verse. This is said. The evidence is when our time for liberation from this material world has come, that's the time we meet a devotee of the Lord, which means we get the opportunity to practice devotional life. So अपना समय आ गया है, पर निर्धारित समय के साथ बताया जाएगा. That's the point here. Alright, so how does one get attraction to make the initial start in devotional service? We discussed that point through association. Amongst your devotee, a case study of Narada the boy, like this. So eligibility for Krishna consciousness, categories of pious activities, Bhoga Unmukha Sukriti, Moksha Unmukha Sukriti, and Bhakti Unmukha Sukriti. We already spoke about these categories like this. Sutta Vacha Evam Sambhasaya Bhagavan Narado Vasavi Sutam Amantrya Vinaranyan Yayo Yadachiko Muni. Sutta Goswami said, thus addressing Vyasa, Srila Narad Muni took leave of him and vibrating on his Veena instrument, he left to wander at his free will wherever willing. 1.6.37. Prabhupada writes beautiful in the purport. Every living being is anxious for full freedom. This is one of my favorite purport. Very beautiful definition of freedom. Every living being is anxious for full freedom because that is the transcendental nature. And this freedom is obtained only through the transcendental service of the Lord. We can just imagine that. I'm giving you a preview. What happens when you attain that transcendental realm? We can just imagine the extent and unlimitedness of Narada's freedom, which is as good as that of the Supreme Lord. There is no reason or obligation for his traveling. No one can stop him from his free movement. Hare Krishna. Similarly, the transcendental system of devotional service is also free. It may or may not develop in particular person even after he undergoes all the detailed formulas. Similarly, the association of the devotee is also free. One may be fortunate to have it, or one may not have it even after thousands of endeavors. Therefore, in all spheres of devotional service, freedom is the main pivot. 1.6.38 purport like this. I'll conclude with this last verse. What had happened in this subject matter, there was very condensed information given in two separate pages or two separate chapters. And therefore, devotees generally don't understand it at large. So therefore, I just included some quotation to help you understand. Now you go back and read the second chapter, first page, and third chapter, first page. Not now, later on. Then hopefully this will make it more clear. Making the last shloka on this subject matter of eligibility for Krishna consciousness. This is from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, 14th. We read this actually. This was a definition he gave. Ya kenapi bhagena jata shaddo sa sevanena ati sakto na vairagya bhag asyamadikaryasu. One has become purified by association with great devotees engaged in the service of the Lord, who is not overly attached to material enjoyment, nor overly renounced or falsely renounced. Such a person is a qualified candidate for devotional service. But again, to make a point, it is not that despite all these formalities, everyone will still take to bhakti. Why? Freedom is the main pivot. Bhakti is all independent. Bhakti is not governed by any rules and regulations. Similarly, it depends on an individual. What is his willingness? You cannot put things into a system. If somebody has come in contact with devotee, yes, once who has come in contact with devotee, his bhakti have started. But you cannot say what is the tariq, what date. We cannot put it. It all depends on the individual's willingness to take it. And what to say if in between he gets into an accident, which means Vaishnava Aparadh. Then everything what he has done is derailed. Then he has to start it from all beginning. That's a point about the subject matter. With this, we conclude the second topic of this chapter 2. In the beginning of chapter 3, also eligibility for Krishna consciousness. The attraction for Krishna consciousness in association with pure devotees is a sign of good fortune. It is confirmed by Lord Chaitanya that only the fortunate person, by the mercy of both the bona fide spiritual master and Krishna, will get the seed of devotional service. This is chapter 3, first page, second paragraph. Prabhupada writes, Hare Krishna. Now we can go to the third chapter. There is only a small section because we have discussed, NOI we have discussed already, right? So now there will be discussion on types of devotees. So we can take that. If in case anyone has any questions or comments, we can take that first.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Hare Krishna,
Can you
Vijay
take the
Director. Can I
presentation?
ask you a question?
Yeah. Yes, please go ahead. We'll have some discussion now. If time permits, then we'll go ahead. Otherwise, we'll pause here only. Yeah, who is speaking?
This is Radha Mandali.
Oh, yes, Madhu.
Yeah. Prabhuji, here as first thing is, मतलब बहुत सारा confusion है. See, the first thing is कि we cannot call ourselves devotee because we are sadhakas.
No, why not? This is part of, these are the three stages of pure devotional service. Sadhana bhakti, bhava bhakti, prema bhakti. Where it is said you cannot call yourself a devotee. It's a different thing. A devotee doesn't want to call himself a devotee. But technically there is nothing mentioned that, a sadhana bhakta is not a bhakta otherwise. Why it would be said sadhana bhakti? Why the sadhana bhakti?
Okay.
Correct?
Yes, Prabhuji. You made it clear one thing. Secondly, a very personal question. This is like, as you said, ki the devotee, it is an individual choice, as you said. But then sometimes what happens, like since last 17 years, I am practicing devotional service. And every day in, day out, my Prabhu is eating prashadam, he is taking darshan, everything. So why is he not attracted? तो कई एक point ऐसा हुआ कि at one point I just thought शायद there is flaw in me, शायद मुझ में ही बहुत मतलब प्रसाद का potency नहीं है, शायद मेरा devotional service ठीक नहीं हो रहा है, शायद मैं worship अच्छे से भगवान जी को नहीं कर रही हूँ. Is that so?
Okay, so my question here is, think about Duryodhan, Dhritarashtra. Pure devotees like Arjun, Yudhishthir, they were the cousin brothers. Kunti, a pure devotee, she was in the same family, they lived in the same palace. So I would say we should not subject ourselves to this kind of thought process. I am not pure enough because of this, other person is not changing. We need to do what we can do, but at the end of the day, we also have to recognize that there is a free will on the other side also. And what
Okay.
we need to do, we have to continue doing. Now, we don't know what exactly is the background of the other individual. Why other individual is not able to take to bhakti. As we said, if somebody is too much associated or attracted towards bhogaishvara, he cannot practice bhakti. If somebody is very renounced, just like Mayavatis and Gyanis, they cannot take to bhakti. So this could be many different reasons why somebody really cannot take to bhakti at the given situation. Maybe sooner or later, not this lifetime. So what happens is, this is a very common question mothers have at times when they see their spouse is not taking up. Don't see your life or restrict your life within the single life frame, thinking that if something happens, would not happen thereafter. Maybe he's developing his Ajnana Sukriti, yet it has not developed enough. And one reason could be, again, I'm a little sensitive with the subject of Vaishnava Aprad. It could be because while doing that, this other person may be committing Aprad also. So one responsibility that I can subject in this situation to a devotee who's there in the family, create a conducive environment enough so that the other devotee doesn't commit Vaishnava Aparadha. Because that is one thing we would fail miserably if by our behavior and actions other commits Vaishnava Aparadha. Then what is the chance or scope of the person taking to bhakti? So you might be feeding Krishna Prasadam, you might have created devotional environment all around, but then if such a person criticizes Prabhupada or devotees or somebody in devotional life, then there are offenses happening. We should take care of that, and that may happen because of our conduct, which would have irritated or angered the other person. Yes or no? Why would
Yes,
this?
Prabhu.
Why would somebody is a blasphemer? He has no reason to blaspheme. What can you do? But somebody is just living his life, but suddenly he gets irritated and starts saying something, which means we unnecessary, we understanding that the person is not ready, so let it be, give him freedom. What's the problem about it? It works. And we don't know after how many lifetimes prasadam worked for us also.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Who knows, in previous lifetime, our family members were trying on us and they thought, tough nut, kuch nahi ho raha. But now this lifetime we picked up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, mother?
Yes, Prabhuji. Because no, हम जैसे बच्चे भी हैं भक्ति में, and but then so yes, but then today's content gave the cleared many doubts which I had in my mind. Thank you so much for the
This is a
class,
very
Prabhuji.
important subject, very important subject. How does bhakti begins? Right now we're going to talk about what is an eligibility to practice sadhana bhakti and for pure devotion. So that will be the second subject matter. But yes, thank you. Vaikuntapati Prabhu, you want to add something?
So, yeah, Prabhu, one of my questions got answered here. So that's nice. Thanks for that. There's another question, when we're showing this 10.51.43 of Srimad Bhagavatam, what you were saying, and in that you are talking about the Lord himself he gives and the time has to come and all those things for the person to take up to devotional service, we were saying. So sometimes when we preach, we do come across this type of reactions from some people. Jab samay aa jayega, hum apne aap aa jao. They say that also, So
Correct.
which means that's also a fact, is it not? So by what we read here, there's a that's
What was
also
the
a
reference you were quoting, Prabhu? I had shown that in presentation. I would like to see that exactly.
Yeah, 10.51.43.
10.51.
Uh,
10.51.43. Yeah, that's
time
ours.
factor.
So when the material life is of a wandering soul has ceased, O Achyuta, he may attain the association of your devotees, and when he associates with them, there awakens in him devotion unto you, who are the goal of the devotees and the Lord of all causes and their effects. Even that situation has to rise because of some causeless mercy. Otherwise, how would it begin? I was just making a point, but how does it all happen? It all has to happen because of some causeless mercy of some devotee who would have interjected in our life, where now the path for liberation would have started.
No, I understand that. But what I'm saying is that in your presentation, when you did that, you showed that slide, In that slide, you're talking of the time factor. Rather, the our time aana chahiye when the Lord's mercy comes. And we do come across these types of reactions from people, saying that, "Are hamara samay aa jayega, to hum apne aap aa jayenge." So, so that answer you also get that one.
Correct. तो
But
उनका समय आ गया ना, because they met you. That is the point which is said here.
बराबर
The
है.
good fortune never arises. They met a devotee.
Okay. So, yeah, so that's what once Jayadvaita Swami Maharaj's lecture, he was telling this, that uh, for anything and everything, for mental activities, you don't look for time. जब मन में लगता है तभी you do that immediately. But when it comes to devotional service, if people are talking of the time has to come, then only I will be able to do it and all these things. So now the time has come. You should think like that when.
No,
when you
I
hear
mean,
from-
what they're saying is correct, but it all begins with how does that good fortune arises? So prior to that, we saw many verses. Brahmande Brahmite Kone Bhagyavan Jiva. The good fortune arises when you meet a devotee. Meeting that devotee would create an opportunity for your way back to God, which means your time in the material world is about to get exhausted. But that situation arises only because of the meeting with devotee. So when they quote something like that, then we can quote them. How does good fortune begin? And why I say your good fortune will begin from today. Take gulab jamun and sit down peacefully for the class. Your good fortune will continue. So in that way, but I don't know, some of these things have come up. जब भगवान का न्योता आएगा तो हम यात्रा पे चले जाएंगे. People say like that. So fine,
Yeah,
fine.
people do say that.
Sure.
And that's very. I don't know how to explain that. Sometimes you have to be really patient when people talk.
Okay.
So plus one more question I got connected with this under one act that earlier he was. I've just lost it, Prabhu. I will again.
Sure.
Afterwards, when
I'll take it from Mother
Sorry.
Shivani and I'll come back to you, Prabhuji. Yes.
Right.
Mother Shivani, go ahead.
हरे कृष्णा प्रभु दंडवत प्रणाम।
Yes.
प्रभु जैसे माता जी पहले पूछ रहे थे ना कि अब वो अपने प्रभु को इतने सालों से प्रसाद खिला रहे हैं फिर भी उनके लाइक भक्ति नहीं आ रही है, और आपने फिर बताया कि हमारा भी जो बिहेवियर या कंडक्ट घर में ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए कि जिनसे वो कुछ वैष्णव अपराध कर रहे हो। ठीक है, पर अगर ऐसी सिचुएशन आती है कि वो मान लो हमको इंसिस्ट कर रहे हैं कि हम ऐसी जगह पे चले उनके साथ जहाँ अल्कोहल सर्व हो रहा है, नॉन वेज सर्व हो रहा है, एंड उनके फ्रेंड्स के साथ हम भी साथ निभाएं, और वो बोलते हैं प्याज लहसुन नहीं है ना भाई खा ले तू। सो उस कंडीशन में हाउ टू रिएक्ट प्रभु जी, वो बहुत मतलब समझ नहीं आता है।
Correct.
क्या किया जाए?
I mean, in family life, you have too many permutation combinations. If we begin to answer and resolve one, then there would be many hands raised for different permutation combinations. So, but just because you raise this question, my humble take on this regard is there are certain things which we don't compromise. As long as we are clear with what we can do, what we cannot do, and as long as we respect other person's individuality, and we give other person the freedom to live his or her life, the other person would also honor our freedom to choose how we want to live. The problem arises where we choose a particular lifestyle for ourselves and we dictate on other person, calling the other person to be my spouse, my child and whatnot, and the other person doesn't want dictations from us. When other person sees you're trying to dictate his or her life the way you want to live and the way you think the other person should live his or her life, then other person also begins to dictate how you should live your life. So anyways, every relationship is based on mutual respect, and mutual respect comes from when we respect that person who he or she is. And that only can happen when we understand he is a Jivatma who has his own relationship with the Lord. I'm a Jivatma who has my relationship with the Lord. This is a temporary arrangement because of this bodily relationship when we are here into this situation. Now, if he is not ready or she is not ready to take to devotional life right now, why do I need to superimpose my understanding of how life has to be lived? Well, if he or she is willing to hear, fine. If not, then I need to respect his or her life and give him or her a space to live. And we have to have some mutual understanding and agreement. This is what I'm going to do. Is it okay? I'm not going to interfere anything in your life. Your basic requirements will be all met. Fine. Okay, you need us to accompany you somewhere. We are totally fine. But this is what I cannot do. He'll say, fine, because you're accommodating me. Why should I accommodate? Because ultimately, in a family life, you're staying together. It's not that if you're hurt, emotionally disturbed, the other person is not going to get disturbed. Who wants misery in life? If you have a mutual understanding, maturity enough to understand that, okay, let me respect the other person respect you, because both of you can stay with a peace of mind, it's a win-win situation. At least for those who have been married for several years, that can be resolved. Of course, those who are newly married, there are different situations because you have huge expectations when in the initial marriage days. Everyone comes, every spouse comes, the huge expectation how my life partner should be, how loving and whatnot. Then it becomes a little difficult and complicated. So therefore, those who are about to get married, and if they are practicing devotees, they should set their expectations clear right in the beginning. Don't give a surprise the next day of marriage. What? हम सब ब्रह्म मुहूर्त में उठ के 16 माला नाम जप करेंगे, चलो उठो, विग्रह की सेवा करो, और फिर हम 1 घंटा भागवतम पढ़ेंगे, और फिर भगवान को भोग लगाएंगे, फिर ऑफिस जाएंगे, और शाम को फिर हम बुक वितरण करने जाएंगे. वो बोलेगा ठीक है, जा रहा हूं, वापस नहीं आऊंगा. So the unnecessary we create troubles. All right, mother? Hare Krishna.
Okay, Hare Krishna.
All right.
So, Prabhu, I'm going to second chapter. What you were talking, in the second chapter, we were saying, about the sadhana bhakta. For them, we were saying that simply follow the instructions, and in the beginning, simply follow the instructions without asking questions, and that's the way you move forward in your.
What Prabhupada says, without arguments. Sadhana
Without
bhakti means,
argument.
yeah, you got to follow it strictly, adhere to it in that way. Not that you're not allowed to ask questions, but without argument. 16 hours means chant 16 hours. Okay, so Prabhupada, somebody asked Prabhupada gave a reason. But then people say, okay, why to chant on beads? I get distracted. Can't I just chant? I mean, come on, do it. Well, you understand this kind of a thing without argument. In that way, it is said.
Yeah, understood. But yeah, so in the initial days when the people are coming, we also encourage them to ask questions, and we also encourage them to participate, and so automatically many questions get raised. Some of which, like you rightly said, no, there are some of the questions are also irritating, but then it is unavoidable, is it not? That we have to keep moving on that. We'll have to encourage them to ask questions. Then only the participation comes. Then only the involvement comes.
Once again, asking questions is never prohibited. Even we raised a question, we shared a question that was asked to Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada, I've been chanting for so long, how does I know if I have a quality? Prabhupada answered that. So asking question is never. Initiation means not that you take beads from Guru and walk away. Initiation means now you begin to inquire from your spiritual master how to move forward in one's devotional life. So inquiry is never prohibited, but it's about arguments. Certain rules and regulation, Vidhi has been given to us, then just do it. Why to get up at 4 o'clock? Why do Mangalati at 4:30 also? Why can't we do it 7:30? Oh, just do it at 4:30. You give an answer, then again, because some people have that argumentative nature. So in that way, then you can't really follow somebody. For everything you want to argue about it, which means you don't want to accept. That's the reason you argue. That's it.
Yes.
Sadhana bhakti means no arguments, you follow now. And for that, of course, there is certain qualification, which will be discussed in chapter 3. To be able to practice sadhana bhakti. To begin is attraction, but to practice, there's another set of qualification. Not that everyone who's coming to the program would be able to really engage in bhajana kriya. They may remain restricted to Adho Shraddha Sadhu Sangha. Bhajana kriya is a more serious business matter. Generally, it says through initiation, bhajana kriya begins, which means initiation in the sense, not initiation exactly, which means you are instructed to do something. So that's how you engage. Not everyone can do that.
Yeah, I know. So I got one in my programs coming. He will not chant, but any seva I want him to do, he will do it. So you get also like that type of devotees also. He can't get up in the morning. He cannot do anything. If it's an evening program, then I don't mind coming. And whatever you want me to do, I will do that at that time. With great enthusiasm, we will do that. So you do get people like that also.
Karma yogi.
Yeah.
Not exactly karma yogi, but I'm just giving a point. All right, Prabhuji, fine.
Okay, right.
All right, so we're kind of hitting the time clock here. So I'll just give you a little bit of this introduction to chapter 3, and then we'll see. Where is my presentation? Yeah, types of devotees. And maybe we'll give you some homework to read this chapter 3. I'm just opening that. Chapter 7. No, lesson 7. So this is chapter 3, types of devotees. Again, what is given in the first page, we have discussed that eligibility. This discussion on types of devotees begin from the next page. Let's take a look in the book a little bit so you become familiar. I'll give you a synopsis. All of us have attended NOI. So I'll quickly sum up this discussion. If you would have questions, we can take it next time. So in my book, chapter number 3, this subject matter begins from the next page. If you see, actually it begins at the bottom of the first page only. Devotees may be divided into 3 classes. First page, last paragraph. Are you able to see that? You got it? From there, the discussion begins like this. And there are 3 categories of devotees. And how the 3 categories are divided? So, as we know from our previous discussion, in Upadeshamrita. So, Bhakta type, there are 3 categories: Kanishta, Madhyama, Uttama. They are distinguished on 2 parameters: their faith and knowledge. So, to begin devotion service, attraction and the mercy of devotees, or the mercy of devotees is required. However, qualification, what is a qualification for advancing? This is the subject matter. Please pay attention. How do we advance? That advancement happens based on our faith and knowledge. Therefore, Prabhupada instituted, this exam board where we study Bhakti Shastri, Bhakti Vaibhava, Bhakti Vedanta, where we study Shastras. Getting it? So, how do we advance? The qualification for advancement is maturity of our faith and knowledge. That is to make an advancement. And then, what is the qualification to practice pure devotion service? We'll come to it if in case we are able to cover that like that. All right. So let's move forward. Eligibility of the candidate. It is mentioned in Madhya-lila 22nd chapter, verse number 62. Shraddha Shabde Vishwasa Kahe Sudridha Nishaya Krishna Bhakti Kaila Sarva Karma Krita Haya. Shraddha is confident, firm faith that by rendering transcendental loving service to Krishna, one automatically performs all subsidiary activities. Such faith is favorable to the discharge of devotional service. Faith means conviction that the goal of life is to please Krishna. That is the meaning. So when it is said for Kanishta Adhikari, his faith is weak, which means his goal post is missing. Imagine you're playing a football, but you don't see the goal post only. How would you attain the result of playing football? So faith weak means his faith is still on enjoying life. His faith is how to make this life wonderful. Maybe in association of devotees, I feel happy. It's ultimately my own sense gratification. So the faith is confidence in Krishna. The faith is the goal of life is to please Krishna, give pleasure to his senses. And as we move from Kanishta, Madhyama, Uttama, that degree, that faith, in other words, to that degree, our service propensity increases. Our service attitude improves. Now it is not about I, it is about Krishna. That's what the definition meaning over here. Faith. Neophyte devotees, Kanishta Adhikaris. Eligibility of the candidate. Neophyte. Eligibility, this is from, you can refer this section, Madhya-lila, and Rupa Goswami quotes in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu also. One whose faith is not very strong, who is just beginning, should be considered a neophyte devotee. Now, we read that in Upadeshamrita also. There is a Prakrit Sahitya, if you remember, who is not Kanishta Adhikari. Kanishta Adhikari is a very respectable position, which means Adhikari, which means you have the right to practice pure devotional service. You have the right to pure devotional service. That is what Adhikari, but not Prakrita Sahajya, which refers to somebody who is pretending to be devotee, but who is very attracted towards sense objects. So Kanishta Adhikari is someone whose faith is not very strong. Now, if you go back to Bhagavad Gita, 7th chapter, Krishna talks of 4 kinds of pious being comes to take my shelter. Chaturvidha vajante mam jana sukritino arjuna. Artho athati jigyasu jnanicha bharadasabha. So, Srila Rupa Goswami makes a comparative study here. He talks about where does these 4 categories of bhaktas come in relation to this. Check the sound, please. online. How does we can make unmute mute? How does this four categories of pious being comes in relation to these adhikaris? So those four categories of beings are pre-Kanishta stage. Can you imagine? They are pious, and Prabhupada very categorically writes, somebody who is frustrated, if he does not have Sukriti, he will not take shelter of the Lord, rather he will become atheistic, Buddhistic, or something else. But he'll never take. So those pious souls, even they are not qualified to be called as Kanishta Adhikari. So Kanishta Adhikari is a certain stature in that way. Alright? Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, 2nd chapter, talks about further details of it. You can read it at leisure. I'll give you quick things. I don't have time, otherwise I would have collected input from all of you because we have discussed the subject matter last time. Oh, what do we do? I'm unnecessarily running through it. How many of you remember the subject matter of Kanishta, Madhyama, Uttama? You all remember that? So let's do one thing. Rather than I running through this, it'll be nice to refresh your memory so that you can share the inputs. Because if I tell you, it will be just, okay. So I guess maybe I can pause now and we'll take the subject matter ahead. So just to give you a summary of this chapter, what is happening here. So in this chapter, titled as the types of devotees, that's the chapter? No. Chapter 3 is eligibility of the candidate for accepting devotional service. Under this subject matter, the eligibility was discussed. Srila Prabhupada introduced in the beginning of the 2nd chapter. So therefore I can first of all discuss the types of sadhana bhakti. Rupa Goswami goes in that sequence. Then he talks about eligibility, and under eligibility he talks about the gradations of devotees. The qualification to practice bhakti. That depends on the maturity of your faith and knowledge. To address that, then Rupa Goswami says there are 3 categories of bhaktas: Kanishta, Madhyama, Uttama. And then finally, talking about all this thing, chapter 3 concludes with a very important Hare Krishna. Chapter 3 concludes with a very important point. What is the qualification to practice pure devotional service? Maybe I can just speak briefly on the subject matter and conclude. Prior to that, just to bring to your notice, in chapter 2, we have not discussed, or read the last 2 full pages, which talks about Varnashrama. I just briefly mentioned, if in case by a strict practice of Varna and Ashrama rules and regulations, if you do not come to the conclusion of Krishna consciousness, everything is futile, is what Srila Prabhupada have explained. So kindly read it by yourself. Okay? Now coming to the subject matter, what is the qualification to practice pure devotion service? Let me make this as an open question for all of you. What is the definition of pure devotion service? Anyone remembers? Of course, I know it's early for you to memorize the shloka. Anya abhilashita shunyam jnana karmadi anavratam anukulyena krishnanu shilanam bhakti uttama. So my question again, what will be the qualification to practice pure devotional service? What is the hindrance in the practice of pure devotional service? Let's answer that. Pure devotion, okay, before that, let's define pure devotional, which means it is only meant for the pleasure of the Lord. Is that clear? Now, what is the hindrance in achieving this goal, pleasure of the Lord? What is the hindrance? Bhakti, sense gratification. What else? What is the hindrance in achieving the goal, which means whatever we do is for the pleasure of the Lord? Pleasure of the Lord means pleasure of the Vaishnavas. It all begins from like this. What is the hindrance? One is bhakti, sense gratification. हाँ?
Anya abhilasha. Anya abhilasha.
हाँ, बताइए ना, what is anya abhilasha? They are in 3 categories. Bhakti आ गई. That is a sense gratification. What else? Mukti. Impersonal liberation, desire for liberation. So bhakti, mukti, siddhi, kami, and mystic perfections. So these inherent desires, which we have accrued because of a long stay in the material world, hampers or hinders our practice of pure devotion service. First of all, our struggle is with bhakti itself, basic sense gratification. Then Srila Rupa Goswami doesn't even focus as much on Siddhi. He says the greatest troublemaker for anyone is the desire for mukti. And that is completely opposite. Just like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, what is the last shloka of Chaitanya Shashtakam says? Ashlishava padratam pinastu mam. Then Adashanam. In other words, this shloka says, or Shashtakam last verse, when I for the first time heard it, was very surprising. It is said, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu expressing that mood, that my dear Lord, either you embrace me, either you kick me. In that situation, I would never leave you. In other words, you give me mukti or you decide for me to stay here, doesn't matter. Matlab, where this desire for mukti entirely goes away. Because one of the impetus to take to spiritual life is to get peace in one's life, to get freedom from trouble. And the center of that is this mukti. Therefore, chapter number 4, giving a little prelude here, Srila Rupa Goswami would go on giving numerous quotations of how bhakti overcomes the desire for bhukti, mukti and siddhi. Among all three, the greatest challenge is mukti. Bhakti even minimizes the desire for mukti. Those who practice bhakti, they eventually give up even the desire for mukti. It is only possible through the practice of bhakti. That is your chapter 4. What is the title for chapter 4? Let's take a look. It is just quotations from various Tantra Shastras, Srimad Bhagavatam, Skanda Purana, Padma Purana, you name it, or you don't remember it. It is titled Devotional Service Surpasses All Liberation. That's the subject matter of the chapter 4. So we'll take chapter 3 and chapter 4 next time together. And thus the flow continues. And then chapter 4, just to let you familiarize with this, please read it out. Some beautiful shlokas. I don't know if I can take all the shlokas, but fine. And then chapter number 5 will talk about the purity of devotional service. The main subject matter is how bhakti is independent. It does not depend on anything. Chapter 6, how to discharge devotional service. From here, now your 64 items of devotional service begins, of which the first 20 items are mentioned in the 6th chapter. Then chapter 7 talks about another 13 items, 13 or 18 items for the practice with the rules and regulations, 64 rules and regulation. So that's what the discussion goes on from this chapter up to these are 64 rules and regulation, the discussion. That goes on up to chapter number literally 9. Chapter number 9. Yes, chapter number 9. Up to chapter number 9. Then 6, 7, 8, 9 are the 64 principles of bhakti given by Srila Rupa Goswami. Then the further subject matter comes, which we'll see ahead like that. All right, a little overview. If somebody likes to read, you can go ahead and read it and familiarize yourself with the subject. With that, we'll pause here. Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu ki jai, Srila Rupa Goswami ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you all for joining in.